never been done before.
This guy's got it.
Oh, hello, beautiful people. I better take that thing off, eh? Boo! How are you? I hope you've had a reasonable sort of a day. Oh, look, I've got things going off all over the place here. How's your day been? Pardon me. I've had a, good and a bad day. Today has been a sad day. Today we farewelled one of our own here off the property, and her name was Elizabeth Taylor, a lovely lady. Who passed away suddenly. No, not jabbed, not in any way. Very much on our side in regard to all of that. She had, without going into too many of the details, I guess the easiest way to describe what happened is she had a heart attack after she stopped breathing. Through a variety of reasons, it wasn't asthma. She was unable to breathe, and while there were people there to help her, once she collapsed, there was no way of getting oxygen to her, especially to her brain. And the sad result was that we lost her a few days later. That, of course, all happened Saturday week ago. And today was her funeral. So we've had a solemn day today around here. And in God's arms now, and all blessings to Elizabeth and her family, wonderful people that they are. Been lucky enough to get close to some of them over the last few days. So beautiful, beautiful people, and a lovely lady gone far too soon. Guess what? I found my glasses. I found my reading glasses. Oh, let's see if this makes a difference. Oh my God, I can see who's in the chat room. Amazing when a plan comes together. All right, I did see, I think Sandy was first in the room tonight. God love you, Sandy. I did get your message about Gay or Gail. So Gay or Gail, you wanted to reach out and get a hold of Sandy. If that's the case, give me a tingle or give me an email, carl@vofhq.com, and I will hook you up together so that you and Sandy can converse, if that is what is to be done. Aussie Sue in the room too, God love you. And yes, please like and share. The algorithms are kicking my ass at the moment. We are suppressed on so many levels because, funnily enough, I keep telling you things that maybe I'm not meant to be telling you. And YouTube certainly don't like that. I don't think Facebook like it terribly much either, as I've lost another channel there somewhere, but we will continue regardless. We will not be put off, and there is a fair bit of putting off to be done. I see Paul's in the house and got some interesting questions about Fort Knox. Yes, it might be shown live. That could be a very interesting day for us all. And let me just go back into the live chat. I started a few of those earlier. Gentleese in the room. G'day, mate. Alan, nice to have you in too. What about the story about there's so much gold in the Grand Canyon? I have heard that story, but I tend to believe that there would be gold in the Grand Canyon. Where in the Grand Canyon, I don't know. Grand Canyon's a very big place, but I'm no gold prospector. Go and see Parker Schnabel. I reckon he'd be the bloke who'd know if there was gold there or not. There certainly is gold around other areas in that sort of vicinity. So I reckon there's half a chance. You never know. What else? 6 million gold fillings. Thanks, Paul. All right. Seems like a lot of you are very interested in what's going on in Fort Knox and other places. 4,580 tons of gold is the figure the audit needs to reach. 4,580 tons. That is a shitload of gold. That is a picture of Fort Knox. Apparently, that's about as close as you can get to it if you're just a normal human being. The army, on the other hand, have absolutely no problem getting all over it. And there are rumours to the effect that the army have certainly been there getting all over it. I want to share with you something of a conspiracy that has been going around about Fort Knox since 1974. And that conspiracy surrounds a story that the gold that was audited in 1974 has gone missing completely from Fort Knox, in that it is dead set empty. Now, the article claimed that the Rockefeller family had manipulated the Federal Reserve to sell off all of the Fort Knox gold at a very bargain-based price to European speculators. Now, the source of the article was a lady named Louise Auchincloss Boyer. Now, who was Louise? Well, she was the former executive assistant to a guy called Nelson Rockefeller. Now, she mysteriously died after falling from a 10th floor window in her building 3 days after this story came out. Nelson Rockefeller went on to become, he was already a pretty big name politician, Republican, but he went on to become governor of New York from 1959 to 1973. And then he was vice president under Nixon from 1974 to 1978. So, did all the gold go missing? Well, it's alleged that between November 73 and April 74, 7,000 tons of gold was removed from Fort Knox and shipped to the Federal Reserve in New York. Bear in mind, the Federal Reserve, of course, is a privately owned bank, not federally owned in America. From New York, it was flown to Switzerland and then the Netherlands, where it was claimed to have been sold for $42.22 per ounce. Bear in mind, this is 73, 74, $42.22 per ounce. It was claimed in the article that somebody called Victor Harkin, who oversaw the gold at Fort Knox from 1961 to 1978, let it be known that one of these gold shipments in 1971 required 33 trucks, each carrying 15 tons of gold, to haul it out of there. Those trucks were army trucks, of course. I think I said at the beginning that 1974, so over 50 years ago, was the last time that Fort Knox had been audited, but it wasn't really an audit. What happened in September of 1974 is that 128 participants were walked into Fort Knox under, Supreme Guard, and the audit was a passing around of a few gold bars that a few lucky participants got to handle. Only one of the 15 vaults that are inside Fort Knox was open, and it was only open for a 2-hour viewing period. Bars, serial numbers, and all that were not recorded, and assays were not taken. That means that they didn't really know what they were looking at, whether it was real gold or not, whether it was tungsten or indeed lead painted as gold. Could have been just as simple about that. So, through industry sources, it was verified, or confidently verified is the quote, that gold transfers from those vaults to the COMEX vaults have been occurring at rates of up to 50 tons a day since mid-December of last year. Flights from London to New York carrying between 1 and 2 tons of gold per trip are also happening. Why is London sending gold to New York? And I saw one of you guys ask that question there earlier. Well, this is because the bars will need to be changed. The last recorded details on those bars will be the ones of them being admitted into Fort Knox, the last reliable, if you like. However, how reliable they are will prove to be something else too. Why would the UK be shipping gold back to Fort Knox? Well, they need to fill up those vaults. They need to have 4,580 tons of gold. Now, if it's going to be a proper audit, every one of those gold bars needs to be inspected, tested for purity, needs to be assayed, which means that all of the details of the bar are taken from any numbers, serialization, stamps, all that sort of stuff, maker's marks, all of that is duly noted. And it would have been noted when it was brought in to the vaults, or noted during the manufacture of the bars. And there's only a couple of foundries capable of doing that sort of thing, I think, in America, being able to put out that sort of tonnage. Although I believe it's not an unrealistic achievement, 1 or 2 tons a day, if you're a precious metal foundry. So how do they move all this gold? Well, a lot of gold in the UK, in fact, all of the UK's gold went to Canada during the Second World War. It mostly went to a place called Halifax and then was sent by train down to Ottawa, where it was stored in the Bank of Canada's vaults, deemed at the time to be the safest place on earth. Obviously, London was experiencing the Blitz, and they didn't want all their gold to get blown up. So this operation was called Operation Fish, and it, at the time, was the largest movement of physical wealth in the history of mankind. About $160 billion worth of gold, and that was in 2017 dollars. That's until now. If the rumors are actually true, then there's been movement of over 3,000 tons of gold out of the Fort Knox vaults to the COMEX, and that's worth somewhere in the vicinity of $300 billion. So now Doge are under a great deal of pressure to audit Fort Knox gold holdings and find out whether or not the conspiracy theory turns out to be conspiracy fact, as so many of them have been before. This time round, there is a bit of support for the audit coming from 2 particular names, Rand Paul and Elon Musk. And they're going to join, from what I've seen, there is a plethora of political figures who are querying Fort Knox, the legitimacy of the claim that they still hold 4,580 tons of gold. And while Elon Musk has suggested live streaming the event, I don't think that will happen, because if they were to live stream the event straight away, the world would know. What would happen to the markets straight away if they open up those vaults, all 15 of them, and all they find inside is an echo? Then the markets will crash instantly. There'll be no going into damage control. There'll be nothing. The US dollar will be gone, because what's backing it is air. So I don't think it will be live streamed for that reason. Does that mean that Elon Musk and co might hide the fact that there is large amounts of gold? And look, 4,580 tons of gold is a lot of gold to find. But the projections are that over 3,000 tons of it has been moved out. That should leave at least 1,500 ton sitting there to look at least. Would you trust it? Personally, I would want one of those gold testers, and I would want to test every single bar. Every single bar. And I'd want to audit every single bar. Because if you find a lot of those UK gold bars that have been shipped over, they won't have a US maker's mark on them. They'll have a European maker's mark on them. Probably one that comes out of Switzerland, which won't be too dissimilar to much of the gold that is in Fort Knox right now anyway, except for the fact that I know America produces its own gold bars. But there are 3 companies in particular, precious metal companies in the world, that produce mainly the highest grade stuff, and certainly some of the most collectible stuff, and they are all based out of Switzerland. There's a reason for that. So, yes, that's the story so far with Elon Musk and what's going on with Doge. Nelson Rockefeller, I thought, was an interesting head to pop up in the whole thing. In fact, I had no idea until I was doing a little bit of background reading today that Nelson Rockefeller was a heartbeat away from the presidency when Nixon was president. A heartbeat. He was vice president then. And I can't help but think, I wonder what would have come next had they been able to get him elected. But for varying different reasons, that was not to be. Speaking of not getting elected, Clive Palmer has had a hell of a time trying to get people elected over the last few years. $120 million, it said, he spent on getting one person elected in the last federal election. That one person is Senator Babbitt, who I believe now is no longer part of the United Australia Party, or whatever its last iteration name was, because last week Clive lost a battle in the High Court to maintain the registration of United Australia Party as a political entity in this country. And I've got to say, the Liberals and the Labor Party must have been patting themselves on the back with that decision. God, they must have been laughing all the way to the bank. We've stuffed Clive. Well, Clive blew a trumpet, and a lot of things happened. Now, the Trumpet of Patriots Party is not a new party as such. Trumpet of Patriots has undergone a number of name changes, but it's had that name since at least 2021, I think. Now, the fella who was in charge of it at the time, a fella named Duffield, and was still in charge of it right up until recently, obviously has the right mindset, obviously has an affinity with Donald Trump's agenda, and certainly an affinity with his policies. So too does Clive Palmer. After the Palmer United Party was disqualified from running in the next federal election, it became an interesting issue. From what I understand, Clive didn't seek out the Trumpet of Patriots Party. It was the other way around. Clive has not bought the party. Clive has, as far as I'm aware, not paid a single cent to be involved with the party. He was approached. He gave it a good look. He was asked after having a good look at it, and if obviously with the court finding last week, it would have made his decision a little bit easier. He was offered the chairmanship, not offered, he was offered to stand for the chairmanship and was voted in accordingly, and will be the chairman of the party, but will not be running for any office because, as he said, he's too old. And I've heard Clive is not a terribly well man at the moment, so if you happen to know Clive or you think highly of him, say a prayer for him at this time. I've heard that he could use it. So I think what he's done is he's thrown a curveball into the next federal election. Now, it will come down to preferences. And at the press conference where he announced the Trumpet of Patriots launch, if you like, he was quizzed a lot about how much money was spent in the last election and how much he's prepared to spend in this election. Now, he makes no secret of the fact that he believes most Australians follow and like the policies that Donald Trump has been putting out. Now, what's not to like? Particularly on immigration, for instance. Now, at the moment, immigration in Australia is quite problematic. The government need it because it's the only way of getting new money into the country. And we've seen many great examples of our politicians sucking up the latest immigrants, particularly from India. Bear in mind that the immigrants that are coming from India are not the poorest people, they are the wealthiest ones. They come here, they bring all their money here, and what you may not be aware of either is that if a person shifts from country A to country B and shifts permanently, becomes a citizen of that country, then their SESQV trust is transferred to that country as well. So it's in the Australian government's interest because they have no money. The only way they've been able to prop up the property market is by this huge influx of overseas money coming in from predominantly the Indians, because we have an open door policy there now. It may as well be a completely open door policy because that's exactly the kind of level we are pulling in. There was over 1 million people last year, And they're saying that it's only going to be 350, 400,000 this year. Bullshit. They are juggling numbers. They're trying to excuse, or they do not tell you about student numbers. Or if they tell you about the student numbers, they don't tell you about the full immigrant numbers. The people who aren't coming in as students, the people who are coming in trying to buy into, I don't know, businesses like 7-Eleven. There's no money in taxis anymore, so people are coming here as students running Uber businesses and then running other things on the side, and then hopefully being in a position to gain a longer visa. The problem is these people don't go home. And it's not just Indians. We have a problem with, I think it's over 45,000 people a year who refuse to go home. Right? I can't blame them. Some of them come here from shitholes in the world and get on our beaches, find our beers, find our beautiful women, find our beautiful animals, and fall in love with the place. Why wouldn't you? However, 45,000 a year staying pales into insignificance when you compare it against the numbers of invited immigration that is coming through our doors at the moment. And yep, we do need to do something to stop it. Maybe Clive is that, or the Trumpet of Patriots. I'm not going to say it's Clive Palmer. It's not Clive. It's the Trumpet of Patriots. Could be the party for that if you're at all predisposed to voting. There is also a movement at the moment that is considering being at every polling place, but not voting, handing out how not to vote cards. Now, I'm not sure that you wouldn't get in a bit of trouble for doing that. However, there are some very dedicated people in the world, and it all depends on the words. Remember, words are important. I've been saying that pretty much since day one. Words are important. You need to understand what their meanings are. So if we use the right words on the right flyers at the right time, at the right venues, I think it could have a significant impact. And I know Ricardo is pushing, I think, at the moment for a no vote or no voting sort of platform. I've got to say, I find that very difficult to argue against. We are only feeding the system by continuing to vote for them. I understand the B side of that argument is, well, if we don't vote for them, some arsehole's just going to get in. I would counter that by suggesting it doesn't matter who you vote for, an arsehole's going to get in. It's that simple. It is so tightly rigged now that it's left or right, Labor or Liberal, nobody else gets a look in, and they're making it even harder for new parties to enter the race and challenge them in any significant manner. What they're also going to do when they're knocking out these parties like Palmer United and or United Australia Party and other smaller ones, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, at the moment, if you get over 4% of the vote running in an election, you will get $1 payment. I think it's about, I could be wrong, but somewhere between $2 and $3, I want to say, per vote over 4%. And that usually will cover the costs you've outlaid to put your campaign together, your call flutes, your flyers, and associated other communications. That's designed to help cover those sorts of costs. What will happen with the way that this new electoral system is going to work and the restraint that the Labor and Liberal uni-party have put on us, it essentially means that any new party that is going to try and start up will need to jump through 54 very, very big hoops, might be less than 54, but a number of very, very significant hoops before they will even be allowed to register. The uni party will just go on plundering away, and they will up the figure that they get if you get 4% of the vote. And they will probably not double it. It could go as high as $8 or $9 per vote. And who gets the bulk of the votes? Labor and Liberal. This is how they're going to fund themselves and keep themselves going, off our backs. So what happens if it's a no vote? What happens if nobody turns up? Or, well, we know that a lot of people will. What is the threshold for a valid vote to be held? Even though it is compulsory to vote, if half the country don't turn up to it, is that a valid vote? And if it's not a valid vote, who decides? Who fights for those people who didn't vote to make the argument as to why? And more particularly, where do you make that argument? In the High Court? I think it'd start in the Magistrates' Court where they issue the fines for 500,000 people. But we would know on the night about a very poor voter turnout. But we also know that they can jiggle the figures with postal votes. So they would have a very strong pre-post or pre-poll campaign, like usual, trying to get as many people as possible to vote before the day. And they have a plethora of little tricks that they use. Like your local sitting member will send you all the details about voting, including your voting paraphernalia, the Senate and the House of Representative cards. And all you need to do is tick your appropriate boxes, send it back to that particular representative, and they will make sure that it goes to the AEC for you. How many of those do you reckon get opened? And how many of those that don't vote for you or for that particular incumbent actually get to the AEC, do you think? Not a lot would be my suggestions. Not a lot at all. Malcolm Roberts is going on about foreign ownership at the moment, and I don't think that that is such a bad thing. Oh, my screen seems to have frozen. I don't know if that means that I have or not. Everything seems to have frozen. That's a bit weird. I'll do what they do in radio, and I'll just keep talking until I see it all start moving again. Maybe it won't start moving again. That wouldn't be a bad thing. Malcolm Roberts. Yes, I was talking about Malcolm Roberts. He is a champion. There we go. We seem to be back. I don't know how much of that you've missed, but maybe a fair bit. My apologies. Don't know why it locked up. The computer's doing very strange things. Malcolm Roberts is speaking about foreign ownership. The One Nation put out a number of announcements recently, and Malcolm has jumped on the bandwagon, putting the pause or calling the pause on foreign purchases here of real estate of 2 years as pathetic. And I would tend to agree with him. The foreign buyer ban has to be extended because 2 years is absolutely nothing. Now, it's great that, some action has finally been taken on this front. But as Malcolm Roberts says here, it's not enough. We need to do more, and we need to take back ownership of our country. And that means that foreign-owned homes, foreign-owned properties need to be sold. And they need to be sold back to Australians. Now, the problem at the moment is there aren't very many Australians who have any money, which is, difficult, given the way the government has screwed our economy. It'll be a little while before we get too much more money. However, the prices do come down. The housing market will come down. And of course, that is what the government is trying to avoid because it will crash our economy. More foreign buyers propping us up, propping us up, propping us up. Why can't manufacturing prop us up? I mean, these friggin' morons in the Labor Party have sat by and watched what is an old steel mill in South Australia go under. If Australians were able to invest in that steel mill, knowing full well the price of steel in this country, and knowing the price of steel when it comes back into this country. You see, you may not be aware, most of our iron ore goes overseas, and it goes to China, where it's made into the steel girders and I-beams and box and everything else that you see, and then it's shipped back to Australia. Now, that whole manufacturing process and all that money goes to China. Why? Why? I mean, I don't know how old you are. I am old enough to remember the steel mills of Port Kembla. I'd never been there, but old enough to remember them and talk of them and the songs and stuff written about them. Same for the South Australian mills, the big car makers all the way through South Australia. The proud people in Elizabeth and Gawler and places like that who filled those factory floors and made Holdens and Fords and Mitsubishis and just about every other kind of car ever made in Australia, and all the people who supported that industry, all gone. All gone. We've got to get back to making our own shit. How hard is it to make a car? We've got people here who make race cars every day. How hard is it to make one that goes a bit slower, got a bit more padding? And as of March 1st, all the electronics needed to avoid another car. Do you know about that? March 1st, new laws are going to be introduced on car makers importing vehicles into this country. Every car that comes into the country must have a crash avoidance system in it, which is all well and good. What about all your older cars? Well, if you've got what would now be called an historic car, most of these cars nowadays are registered either on an historic plate or on a club plate. From March 1st, all these cars will have to eventually be fitted with some kind of terrain avoidance system or car avoidance system, or only be allowed to be driven to and from club events. And that is listed club events, advertised, promoted club events. You won't be able to take it for a cruise down the beach on a Sunday or around the block or, up to see Nana. None of that. These are the laws that have to be enforced by 2028. So, folks, did you know that was happening? This is madness. Madness. Terrain avoidance or collision avoidance. I've driven a number of vehicles that have extremely sophisticated collision avoidance systems. Look, they're good. I don't know how good they are in a head-on sort of situation, particularly if the vehicle coming at you the other way doesn't have the collision avoidance system. But I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. It's pathetic the way that government overreach is now affecting us in so many different ways of our life. And it gives me the shits. We have spoken on a number of occasions about the beginnings of the Talmud, the Khazarian Mafia, Ashkenazi and Khazarian Jews, and the nature and whatnot of their beginnings. You might find in the description of tonight's show there is a link. I'll post it again in the chat now. If you are interested in the hidden story of the Kharzarian Mafia, then I will post this link up in the chat now. It is in the main description of this show too, in case you haven't got it. This will give you a very good understanding of how it all worked, the timeline of how the Khazarians came into being, how they were pressured from the countries surrounding them, and I can give you a little bit of an idea of the time. This is from 0 to 800 AD. That particular area is the area that the Khazarians were working, shall we call it. They were living and working through there. They were very nomadic people. They had a king, and they murdered, robbed, and raped their way basically through Europe, right up until about 800 AD, where the Russians and the Germans and a few others got together and said, hey, we're not doing this anymore. You now have to pick a religion, and they chose Judaism. They'll give them three: Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. And they chose Judaism. Of course, it didn't stop them doing what they were doing: murdering, raping, pillaging. But it did upgrade their skills a little bit because they became masters on the road of assuming identities of those that they'd murdered. And of course, most of the people traveling on those roads were merchants or people traveling with money. And that's where our banking system also started to come into play, because there was a certain family named Rothschild who understood the banking system very, very well, and understood that merchants traveling from one country, one city to another, who had large amounts of gold on them, were prime targets for thieves, the Khazarian Mafia. So what did they do? They set up the banking system in 5 different cities around the world, and that meant that you could deposit your gold in country 1 and then travel to country 2, go into their bank there and withdraw not your gold, but some gold, to that amount, and make your purchases. That's where our banking began. And they've been ripping us blind ever since, the bastards. So I don't know, folks, if that's something for you that you really want to ponder on. Be prepared for some horrible information that you'll learn in that Khazarian link, because, well, they were horrible bastards. And the fact is, they're still with us. Talmud followers. Talmud. Not Torah, Talmud. Be very aware of them. Listen, before I go tonight, I want to reach out to the people of Casey and surrounding areas in Melbourne. An absolutely brilliant turnout a couple of nights ago to the Casey Council meeting. Now, for those of you who are unaware why people might want to turn up at the Casey Council meeting, Casey Council is the council in Melbourne that has decided that if you want to change your oil in your car, in your driveway on the weekend, you will need to pay them a fee of $400. And it gets worse. They've got a whole heap of fines. In fact, somebody has been fined already for doing something in their driveway that the council didn't give you a permit for. So the other night at the council, a few people turned up. Right. Well, that went shit, didn't it? Do you think they don't want me to show you the Casey Council bit? Whole system just went woof and turned itself off. I'll try one more time to play this little council piece for you.
All councillors and staff vacate the council chamber for 10 minutes.
I should point out that the councillors vacated the council chamber, but not because of all that yelling and shouting. The 400 or so people who turned up were very respectful, very quiet, very respectful, right up until the time where the council decided they were going to not ask the questions that had been pre-submitted, or take questions from the floor, or indeed speak to the people at all. I don't know how these councillors can lie straight in bed at night. How can they not know that the decisions they've made are so unpopular? If you can get 400 people to turn up, that means there's close to 40,000 of them that feel just as strongly. They just couldn't get to the event. That's a lot of votes in a little council. Well, Casey's quite a large council, and I have no doubt that that number will grow. Those councillors need to be thrown out. Mind you, you'd probably have to go to an election for that. We've already had a little chat about elections, haven't we? All right, folks, I'm going to love you and leave you. It's been a very, very, very big and tiring day here. So I'm going to shuffle my way off fairly shortly. I haven't had much to eat today, so I bought myself some lamb mint sausages yesterday. I'm thinking a sausage in bread might be coming my way shortly. You guys enjoy yourself tonight. Don't go and get too carried away. And I will catch you again tomorrow for the Friday free-for-all, of which I'm not exactly sure who's going to turn up. Hopefully Vincent. I might see if I can't get Darren Bergwerf on, who was at that Casey Council meeting. And so too to Tony, who was in the chat, I think, tonight too. Thank you for the images that you sent along too, mate. Alberta, what? Why don't you run for the trumpet party? Well, you're the first person to suggest it, but nobody's actually asked me. And you'd have to really believe in the election system. We might have a few conflicts in that. Although I do believe that Trojan horsing the system, although Trojan horsing requires a little bit of secrecy, and I've probably blown that by saying Trojan horsing, but I do believe that we need to get more of us in. And it's easy to say it's like what's happened with Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is a very popular person, and the American electoral system is very different to the Australian electoral system. So the leader of this new Trumpet for Patriots party is a lady whose name escapes me right now, comes out of Newcastle area, out of the Hunter. Now, look, I saw her speak. She looked very competent, speaks better than Pauline. Not such an annoying frequency in the voice. But, yeah, look, let's see. I know some people on the side who are having some dealings with Clive and associated other people on another matter. I might be on the sidelines of that, and I might be able to get a little bit of a look at the party and see what it's all about. Certainly, I'll bring you that news. But yeah, I'm a bit in the I'm a bit on the other side of the fence with this. I may not be the best person for it. However, never say never. Do you think? Guru seems to be keen. Yeah, well, Guru has experience with this sort of thing. He's run for politics before. I haven't. But you get enough of us in there, we will make a difference, won't we? And the good thing about it is that while our system is different, those representatives, if elected by you, were to have the balance of power, if this lady is to become the next Prime Minister, then I would want to know beforehand exactly how keen they are and what levels of disclosure they are prepared to bring to the Australian people. And Sue Ellen Wrightson, thank you very much, Sandy Kay. Yeah, Sue Ellen Wrightson, she spoke very, very well. But I would be very keen to learn what levels of disclosure they are willing to bring and what levels of disclosure they are going to ignore. And I'm not up for ignoring too many, if you know what I mean. So we'll just have to wait and see how that sort of plays out. All right, folks, love you and leave you for tonight. And if you can, of course, stop by the Good Samaritan Donkey Sanctuary page and go and have a look at some of the beautiful donkeys that Sandy has out there at the moment. If you can help them a little bit, that would be great too. If you can help us a little bit, that would be great too. I haven't played Vince's ad in a while, so I better do that.
Are you passionate about supporting independent media and social events? Voice of Freedom is dedicated to bringing you the latest happenings and things that matter. But we can't do it without your help. By donating, sponsoring, or becoming a member, you're not just supporting our mission. You're joining a community that values transparency and engagement. Your contributions allow us to continue producing high-quality content that informs and inspires. Visit VOFHQ.com to make a donation or explore sponsorship or membership opportunities. You can even donate using crypto. Together, we can amplify voices that deserve to be heard as we continue to create a vibrant platform for social change. Go to VOFHQ.com. Help us to help you by joining us and making a difference today.
Oh, yeah, we certainly need you to help make a difference, folks. You can go to VOFHQ.com. There's a donate button there, or we'd love to have you on board as a member. Also, while you're there, click on the Corruption Whistleblower link that's right there on the front page. And what you will find there is all the paperwork you need to learn about fiduciary duties. And the fiduciary duty document is something you should print out and carry with you at all times. I'm going to have Mona back on the show shortly to explain more about fiduciary duty, and we're going to do a little bit of learning about that. But this week has just been very, very difficult. But if you are also interested in the grand jury indictment process, you can download the brief of evidence for the grand jury indictment from vofhq.com. I encourage you to do that. If you want to be part of that process, all you need to do is fill in the dotted line and send it back to this, to the address that's provided, and that'll be back to the corruption whistleblower people, and they will have, well, I already know they've got a significant number of documents already been returned to them. So that's great. The more, the merrier, so to speak. And we will try and catch up with Peter and Donna in the next week or so to get a little bit of an update as to where we are in the serving of those indictments. It is a big process. So that'll probably happen next week. Until tomorrow night, folks, be safe. Do the things that you do so well. And if you are going to go out on the roads, then always avoid the dickheads. Be safe.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?